All right, our bell peppers. How did we cut the bell pepper last week? All right, not everybody's in it, so maybe you're, I want you all to speak up. Makes me feel like you're connecting with it. So we're gonna cut the top and the bottom off first, and this is to really just get at it so we can remove the seeds. But these tops and bottoms, would you throw these away? No, that's a lot of money. Bell peppers, even green bell peppers aren't cheap, and sometimes a year they're very expensive. So we're gonna dice these, again for a rice day, we're gonna cut this into strips. So now what? Okay. Our goal here is to cut away the seeds and the membrane that's there. So it could be done a couple different ways, especially if you have a real odd-shaped a bell pepper. You might choose to just cut the sides away, where you would cut one side away, and remove the majority of that membrane. In the case of most bell peppers where you can roll around it, you would just make a slash in, turn it on its side where it's flat, and you could press the skin of the bell pepper flat at the outside and cut away the seeds and the membrane in one swoop, hopefully. And then stack these up, and we'll come back and slice those later on. Same thing here. We have a real kind of curved area here that's going to be hard to roll around, so might choose just to take this off in a couple different sides. Trying to open it up and roll that out so we end up with some nice big flat pieces that we can stack up. So dice, slice, so it's just a matter of maybe stacking 2 or 3 up at a time. Again, we were sharpening knives earlier today. Peppers are a good way to tell if your knife's sharp. If you don't cut all the way through it, you might have a little bow in your blade, or if you're hearing a clunk, 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 your knife might be a little bit dull. It shouldn't really clunk too much. But just rocking on the tip of the knife. I'm right-handed, so my left hand's my guide hand. Working all the way through the peppers, just cutting those into strips. If you go to pick it up and find out that you have an accordion, it means that you're not slicing all the way through the skin. And that might be you need to make sure you're coming down and pushing through when you're slicing. Maybe you're just chopping down and not getting all the way through. Or again, you might have a little bow in your blade. So same thing here. We have any other colored bell peppers out there? Everybody get red bell peppers, or? Okay. I know sometimes we've gotten a little variety of color there, which looks nice for a stir fry. So that's that. With these other odd pieces from our top and our bottom, we could take these strips, turn them, and cut them into dice, or kind of a chopped look to it. With these tops and bottoms, we're just going to try to approximate that the best we can. And it's a little bit more labor intensive, but we're using them, so we're not throwing them in the trash. Utilization is trying to use every little scrap that we have. Not if it's a bad quality, not if it's something, I have to use it, it's in my refrigerator, but using it allows you to take advantage of that money and the profit that could be made from that. All right, so that catches up with what we did last week. But we're going to separate out the diced from the sliced. Again, the sliced are going to be used for the stir fry. The dice is going to be used for the rice. We'll just set that aside here. And then let's talk about our broccoli. What can you do with broccoli? How would you serve this in at home or in a restaurant? Flowerettes. Okay, maybe cut it into flowerettes, and that's probably going to be appropriate for what we're doing today. We're just taking off the little flowerettes here. Another thing could be as a spear, and there might be one that you would cut into half, or one that, or maybe this would just be a single portion, or one that was much larger where you cut into quarters. The key thing is there's a lot of edible food here in the stem, but the outside portion of it is very fibrous and tough, and so you would want to peel that, or in the case of our stir fry today, we could save it and peel it and use it in our stir fry. But to cut into a spear, maybe it's a matter of, if we're going to make this a half portion, cutting it in half, maybe cutting the stem end on an angle, taking your knife and just trimming a little bit of that stem off to expose a little bit nicer edible portion there. And then we could blanch that and shock that. It could just be reheated, maybe in a saute pan, roasting. You just wouldn't want to discolor it, or even just toss in a pan with some butter. And that could be a part of a plate as a single portion. Or in the flowerets, we're just going to cut a little bit higher into the head where some of the flowerets start to come off. You can even pull it apart, or if we're doing all the work with our French knife, and trying to work organized, part of that is trying to orchestrate yourself where you don't have to put your knife down. Each time you put your knife down, especially if we're cutting a case of broccoli or a case of red bell pepper, or a case of squash for squash casserole, you're stopping what you're doing and you're losing time. You're losing some of that efficiency with it. So here, cutting into the flowerette, a big flowerette like this, you could even just cut right into it, maybe quarter it up and cut it into these smaller pieces. And we're going to do that with our spears here as well, because we're going to use this for the stir fry. And we're going to peel these stems and grab a couple containers here for our product. So in the case of a really larger piece of stem, maybe take your knife, cut around it almost in cutting off quarters, and remove the thicker outside portion that's more fibrous. Or we could take our paring knife, and use our paring knife to peel it, just in our hand. And you can tell, like in the case of this one here, you could tell the thicker, more fibrous outside portion. It's got a different look to it. It's darker in color. The inside of it's kind of creamy and lighter. But all of this could be used. What else could you use this stem for? If we were just cutting a case of broccoli and we're peeling the stems, what might be a possible use for that? Okay, it'd be a great for soup, where we're looking for the flavor of the broccoli and we're going to puree it up, and you could even leave some of these stems on if you're going to strain it out. But keep in mind that when we go to puree this, all this stem is going to be just kind of a fibrous bird's nest, and so it might be a little bit labor intensive to strain it, but it would be worthwhile if we're dealing in a large enough batch. Maybe even take some of our more tender pieces or the flowerets, and after our cream of broccoli soup is made, we could add those back in. One of the things that I'm really fond of is I'll take the stems and I'll peel them and I'll dice them, and kind of along the lines of a cream of broccoli soup, I like some real nice chunky soups at times. And I'll do like a broccoli chowder, and so I'll dice up some potatoes, take the stems of the broccoli and dice it up as well. Maybe cut the flowerets into some much smaller pieces where it's just like the little flowers itself that go into there later on. But that way it's kind of a real chunky, hearty soup. And as we get into colder weather, that might be something that you choose to serve. But we could use this as a part of a casserole. You see in the grocery store, what do you see broccoli in that bagged lettuce section other than flowerets? None of you used the shredded broccoli before? It's like shredded up broccoli, kind of like coleslaw. And that's really just these stems that have been shredded up. And so it's a byproduct of processing the broccoli, but you could combine that with some ranch dressing and maybe some cooked bacon, or even some shredded cabbage, and do like a broccoli ranch slaw. There's a lot that could be done with it. But to that industry that's cutting up all those flowerets that has a lot of stems to use, that's money to them. And that's the way you should kind of look at it in your utilization as well. Like, I paid, how much does broccoli cost in the grocery store? Anybody buy any broccoli this week? No? All right, let's say it's $2, you know, for a bunch of broccoli like that little cluster that we had. You know, well, you paid $2 for all this as well. You know, this isn't what cost you $2. You know, it's all of this, the waste and everything else that cost you $2. And so that's really a thought of that with the utilization part of it. We're going to talk about green onions next. What part of the green onion is useful? All of it. What's the only part that you wouldn't use? Like you look at that, what are the parts that you wouldn't want to eat out of that? All right, the root tips. Also, sometimes the discolored leaves or wilted leaves at the top. You know, a lot of times we use green onions like we would use an herb, meaning that we're kind of adding it in at the end of the cooking process. You know, if we were sauteing some green onions with some carrots, this would cook a whole lot faster than the carrot. You blow a little bit of hot air on this or put it in a hot pan for a second, it's done. You know, and so you really add it at the end. But a lot of times when you have green onions that don't look so hot like this, like you got some that are real sad parts of the green onion, got to kind of pick through them, maybe pick off the wilted ends, you know, and that way you're ready to go. You know, maybe give them a dunk, you know, if they haven't been cleaned already. You know, this again, think about this in conjunction with that ginger peelings we had, you know, doing a little bit of a soy syrup reduction. Maybe we're going to use as a dip for a wonton. You know, we could go ahead and put these green onion stems or trimmings in that, you know, and help add some of the flavor. You know, it's just not appealing in the way it looks, but that doesn't mean it can't lend flavor to whatever we're doing. With this part of it here, we're going to use everything but just these little hairy root ends. This white part is useful, and a lot of times I hear people go, oh, you can't use that part. You can. You just want to treat the white part of the green onion sometimes different than the greener part. The greener part is more tender. You know, you maybe add that in at the end of the cooking process. The whiter part is tougher, not tougher like unedible, but it holds up the cooking a little bit better. So in that case, you might use those more like a regular white or yellow onion. Yeah, and so for our stir fry today, just in talking about it, we could use this at the beginning part of the cooking process like we would use a regular onion. We would more like garnish, kind of stirring it in at the end and letting the residual heat cook